Imagine you work at a marketing firm, and you've been tasked with choosing the names for 3 new products: a gourmet ice cream, a luxury car, and a light beer. The clients have already narrowed it down to 2 options for each product, and they want you to make the final call. We'll come back to this in a bit, but if this was 100 years ago, the process would have been so much simpler. You could name the product after its inventor, like the Singer sewing machine. You could name it after the ingredients, like Coca-Cola, which was originally made from the coca leaf and the cola nut. Or just use whatever letter comes next in the alphabet, like Ford's Model T, which was preceded by a less famous version called, you guessed it, the Model S. But today, naming products is both a science and an art for the companies that specialize in it, many of which employ professional linguists to make sure the names activate the deepest, oldest parts of your brain. I'm Dr. Erica Brozovsky, and this is Otherwords. Otherwords. Coca-Cola is one of the most recognized brand names in the world. And though its inventor, John Pemberton, probably wasn't thinking of linguistics when he coined it, he did stumble upon several phonetic tricks that are standard in today's marketing industry. The first is alliteration, the repetition of initial word sounds. Alliteration makes phrases memorable and pleasing to the ear and has been employed in brand names for decades, like Best Buy, Dunkin' Donuts, Chuck E. Cheese, and Weight Watchers. Coca-Cola also features an alternating consonant-vowel-consonant structure like Toyota, Gatorade, Amazon, and Sara Lee. This sound pattern is very easy to pronounce. In fact, it's one of the first that babies are able to replicate. It's why Chuck E. Cheese rolls trippingly off the tongue, but Chuck Cheese sounds like a wheel of brie hitting the wall. But what about the phonemes themselves? Do the individual vowel and consonant sounds that make up our words matter? Would Doca-Dola sell as well as Coca-Cola? Surprisingly, this debate is over 2,000 years old. In Plato's dialogue Cratylus, 2 philosophers argue over whether the sounds of words are relevant to their meanings. Hermogenes says no, that phonemes themselves are essentially arbitrary. Socrates eventually concedes the point, yet maintains that the really good words do have sounds that match their meanings. The example he gives is rho, a kind of rolled R which he claimed evoked movement and speed, like in the Greek words rheo and thraco. Maybe he was right, since today R begins a lot of movement-related words in English too, like run, road, and river, not to mention brand names like Range Rover, Reebok, and Roomba. The concept Plato was pondering is today known as phonetic symbolism, or sound symbolism, the study of whether language sounds have inherent psychological connotations. In the early 20th century, Ferdinand de Saussure, the so-called father of modern linguistics, was skeptical of the idea, saying that the sign is arbitrary. But in 1929, linguist Edward Sapir conducted a study where he showed participants 2 tables, a large one and a small one, and asked them which was called mill and which one was called maw. Over 80% of the respondents chose mill for the small table and maw for the large table. Similar studies were conducted over the next 80 years that corroborated Sapir's findings, most notably the famous Buba-Kiki test of 2001. Speakers of English and Tamil were shown these 2 shapes and asked which one was named Buba and which Kiki. Over 95% of respondents agreed that the rounder shape was Buba and the spiky shape Kiki, regardless of their native language. Obviously, there is some inherent association between phonemes and psychological concepts that exists across cultures, but that doesn't mean Saussure was totally wrong. Most of our words are arbitrary. If you were raised to call this a cat and this a dog, you wouldn't know any different. As long as we all agree on the meanings of the words, the phonemes are pretty much irrelevant. But when confronted with an unfamiliar word, that's when our brains grasp for any clues to the meaning, including phonetics. Since new brand names are by definition unfamiliar, marketers are very deliberate about what subtle signals the sounds might be sending to potential customers, and the industry has commissioned several studies over the last few decades to tease out these associations. So what did they find? Let's start with the vowels. Vowels are voiced phonemes made with an open, unobstructed vocal tract. They are typically organized depending on the location of the resonant chamber created by your mouth shape. Vowels like E, I, and E are considered high front, while o, and ah are low back. Study after study found that humans associate the low back vowels with things that are large, heavy, round, and masculine, and the high front vowels with things that are small, light, thin, sharp, and feminine. That's why superior subjects name the big table mall, and why the vast majority of people think this looks more like a kiki than a booba. Consonants are formed when the vocal tract becomes obstructed. That is, when any of the articulators of your mouth and throat touch each other. If the airflow is completely stopped and then bursts out again, the consonant is a plosive. Think p, t, and k. These are the voiceless plosives. Your voice box doesn't vibrate when you make them. If you add voice, you get b, d, and g. Voiceless plosives are generally considered to be smaller, lighter, and sharper, so they're a good fit for brands like Pepsi, Tic Tac, and Kodak. Voiced plosives are often seen as more potent or luxurious. Think Duracell, Godiva, or Balenciaga. If the airflow is not stopped, but only restricted, causing friction, the consonant is considered a fricative, like f, s, and sh. Again, these are voiceless. Their voiced counterparts are v, z, and zh. Fricatives are considered soft, quick, and airy, so they're appropriate for products like Febreze, Silk, and Swiffer. We should also give a special shout out to the sound, classified as a nasal because air passes through your nose when you make it. It's often associated with tasty foods, which is not surprising considering it's the sound we make when we eat something yummy. Then maybe why there are so many sweets that start with M, like Mars Bar, Milky Way, Mallomars, and of course, M&Ms. At the other end of the tastiness spectrum is the diphthong U, made by combining the E and the U vowels. This sound doesn't get used much in marketing, perhaps because it's associated with things that are nasty or gross or ew. Think putrid or puke or mucus. So what about those hypothetical examples we started with? They were taken from actual psycholinguistic studies. And the results don't just depend on the product, but how the marketers want to frame it. If the ice cream is positioned as gourmet, participants preferred the name frosh, since the low back vowel implies richness and creaminess. But if it's pitched as a sugarless, low-fat dessert, frish might be a better choice with its thin, light front vowel. Similarly, participants preferred the name Bromley when the beer was described as a dark, thick ale. But for a light beer, Brimley was more popular. And finally, if you wanted to sell a zippy sports car, the voiceless plosive t of Terran might imply speed and agility. But if it's a luxury sedan, the voice plosive of Baron better evokes luxury, like BMWs and Bentleys. Terran and Baron also have homophones. To tear can mean to go fast, and Baron is an aristocratic title. Sound symbolism helps brands make a good first impression, but they're far from rigid rules. For example, Kleenex markets itself as light and soft, yet contains two hard, sharp k sounds. And Q-tip has that nasty ew sound, even though the product is all about good hygiene. And yet, not only did these two brands become the most famous of their kind, their names are now synonymous with the product itself, a phenomenon known as Genericide. It also happened to Band-Aid, linoleum, thermos, and to bring it full circle, Coke, which is now used in some parts of America as a synonym for any sugary soda. Apparently, in the industry, genericide is considered a bad thing, since it means your product has to essentially share your brand name with all your competitors. But I'd imagine it would still be a point of pride for whoever came up with it. After all, they made up a word that matches the thing it describes so well, even Socrates would be impressed. Before we continue, I need to talk about PBS. Congress recently eliminated funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds public television and radio stations across the United States. Many of these stations are PBS members, and while PBS itself is not entirely dependent on federal funds, these cuts will significantly impact the public media system. Local stations need direct support now more than ever, especially smaller stations who are facing the very real threat of closure. If you want to support PBS's mission, follow the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to donate to your local station. Any amount goes a long way. Thank you. Since it means your product has to essentially, this is not right yet.
You. Yeah. You make the final.
How, like, what height?
That's good.
Here? U.